hurt me, Jack.
Look at this. This is my latest completed on a mode save of BG3.
Dear God.
There's more.
No.
This might be the most heinous thing I have ever committed in gaming. All concept of strategy was shattered into pieces, god tier rolls, AI derps, and somehow Gortash of all people comes out the MVP. So sit back and let me tell you my tale of woe.
Flashback.
It starts on the 30th of November, 2023. Honor mode is added to the game. The hardest difficulty of Baldur's Gate 3, and within 24 hours I'd beaten my first run. This is the start of the problem. The hollowness beginning to set in. Since then, the YouTube content farm went to work, and other people who felt honor mode wasn't quite hard enough started inventing extra stipulations. Let's do this with no excessive barrelmancy, let's do it with no levels, no respecs, no elixirs, no equipment, etc. But the core is always that you would use the other methods to supplement the restriction you chose. Megamind says, no levels? Don't worry, we can counter that with gear, with elixirs, with barrels. No long rests, just respec. Here's some gloves to set your dex to 18. Here's a hat to set your intelligence. In that void is where the urge arrived. What if you started to stack them? No party members, no leveling up, no respecking, no elixirs, and no equipment.
Nothing. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
The reason I tell you all this, I cannot stress it enough. Do not try this yourself unless you enjoy agony and sadness. I have been trying this on and off, and a couple of roadblocks. There were just no brainstorming around beyond desperate prayer to AO to take the wheel. Ye been warned. So let's get cracking, shall we?
Do I make you horny, baby?
The first thing you're going to want to do is find the main menu. I am so sorry for what is about to pass. Next up, you're going to want to press any key to continue, navigate to New Game, and select Honor Mode. We get a wish of good luck from the devs and a fantastic shot of a Mind Flayer doing his best impression of the Hamilton poster.
Who are you?
Definitely not an elf, that's for sure. We'll be playing as the Dark Urge today. There is a reason for this, stay with me. I'll be playing as a Gith so I can change my proficiencies on the fly and also get some extra spells. Next up, we're already a sorcerer, so we will be staying sorcerer. You're going to want the following cantrips. You're going to want Firebolt, Friends, Light, and Minor Illusion. For spells, the best combo in the world, Featherfall and Enhanced Jump. Draconic Bloodline, set to gold setting, for one reason only, that we can get that sweet free disguise self. Moving on to stats and proficiency, I apologize. We'll be having proficiencies in Deception, Intimidation, and Persuasion because God help us, we're going to need it for social checks. Everything possible into Strength for a 17, followed up by Charisma at a 16, knock it to a specifically 14 Dex, making it the most we can get while still having a 10 in Intelligence. And that's it.
Oh no.
Yeah, our con is going to be 8 and our wisdom 8 also. The wisdom we will be offsetting with the Necromancy of Thay, but the con is going to be a problem. Also, since we're here, I'm quickly going to take the opportunity to address, yes, I do start looking like a default Githyanki, and I change into a custom Githyanki later on in the video. You might have noticed that already from the intro. This is recorded in post, as you can probably tell, and is it wrong to say I wasn't expecting this guy to survive? Bearing in mind this long dynasty of adventurers numbers in at least the 100 ands, it's not that surprising that I didn't put effort into character creation until I realized, sweet merciful Filion, this might actually work.
You need a guardian.
No, we don't. Shut up. And so the day begins, and much to my annoyance, someone has put me in clothes. So I start by cursing whoever did this to me.
The torturer behind this cruel prank will meet your malice when you get out of here.
Before immediately stripping off with the best placed offer of overshoes I have ever seen. We cast Enhanced Leap and Featherfall, get used to that, it's going to be happening a lot, and immediately bounce up so that we can try and grab us. Thankfully, a +3 in strength does pull through, and we specifically stand around to wait out the newborn status effect, so us has a little bit more HP and is more likely to survive the Nautiloid on this fine summer's day. Oh yeah, while we're here, real quick PSA. Do not step in fire! And with that out of the way, we make sure that us is topped up with their own jumps. We're going to desperately try and skip Lae'zel's intro, but because it's considered vitally important we get sneered at by a frog lady everyone but me wants to step on them, we're sadly derailed and she invites herself to the party without my consent. Great start. However, just because she's decided to be here doesn't mean that I'll actually use her, or indeed engage with this fight at all. Us, if you just want to run over there for a bit, my guy, thanks. I hope you enjoy the fight you decided to invite us to, Lae'zel, because I gotta bounce. Also, completely understand this is your first time, but I think you missed a signpost on the way into the party which said there is no gear allowed. Now strip. Thankfully, once us and Al here are far enough away from combat, it does automatically drop, meaning Lazy is stuck in a combat of her own creation, and I promise I did try to get her killed, it's just these imps cannot aim for toffee. I grab the rune tablet and plug my hand onto the pod to release Shadowheart. This part is entirely optional, I just felt like doing it because her attitude and reasons I'll go into later somewhat annoyed me on my first playthrough. So a big fat not welcome to the group, Shadowheart, now strip. And since Lazy has finally died to the imps, it's time to go against every piece of World of Warcraft device and stand in the fire. Now that Slim Shady is merrily ablaze, we can pick her up and move on with the plot. We get directed by the most politely animated mind flayer in the world, and sadly rather cock up our initiative rolls so that we're going after a Hellboar. Also, at some point, us got involved in this combat, despite being in another floor entirely. The Hellboar did a dot of damage but didn't fully kill us, allowing me to disengage and hop on over up to the second floor. We need the height. The Mind Flayer tanks some hits, and once it's back to our turn, we do one simple bounce straight on over to the console, meaning that we will be experiencing some minor turbulence. Some more rolling and a sinister staring match later, we are knocked straight out of the ship, and unfortunately it does seem like our beloved Leaf does not make it through the crash. Note to self, probably should pick up one later. But our merry dong dangling in the breeze will have to wait. We have a plot to do, dammit. So moving up the beach, we smile at a corpse, and you might notice something a bit strange about Shadowheart here. Not only has she been inexplicably resurrected from being burned to a crisp, but is also, according to the game's code, because it loves us so much, simultaneously dead and unconscious, and also found an entire new set of clothes, a mace, and a shield between being dead in my bag and this beach. I don't even. But we will be leaving her there so that she stays quiet at least until the Emerald Grove. Meanwhile, we walk around the corner, find Lazy's corpse nice and early on the beach, and use this to introduce something that I should probably mention before it turns up later. The box. I'm throwing my hands up here because of the addition of Baldur's Gate 3 that I have. I start with some kit in this box. However, no one said I had to use it, so it's just going to stay there forever now. As also is Lae'zel. We bounce up the beach and get a hand from our buddy Gale. This will be genuinely important later, I promise. And not only because it, for one, grants us an inspiration. We're not really going to get many of those, and we've got some nasty rolls that are coming up, so we're going to need them. Which is the same reason that we're going to pop around the corner and stomp on this Mind Flayer. Next order of business, picking them up and popping them in the box. Bouncing further up the beach, we grab the Emerald Grove Environs waypoint, and specifically bounce to up here. If you bounce any closer than that, you usually end up triggering the "Open the bloody gate" sequence. However, this way, we can just go straight around it, before bouncing over to Aradin and Zevlor, having a fight about a fight that hasn't actually happened. This sets the tone for how we'll be approaching most of the conversation options in the game. Thanks to picking the cantrip Friends, we're going to get advantage on almost all of our speech checks, which we're going to need, since that 3 in charisma and that 2 in proficiency is all we get. We have to get away from Zevlor before he gets angry that we cast Friends on him, so instead, I just ponder my bush. I really should turn over a new leaf. While we're in camp, we also start accruing the greatest resource that we have, boxes. And specifically, more than boxes, wooden trunks, my beloved. We make a little check-in on Aaron, the sexiest voiced halfling in the world, and this is where our playthroughs might diverge a little bit, dependent on how you want to do this and what gets patched. I'm currently recording this in patch 6, where there is a glitch wherein you can steal a merchant's entire inventory using backpacks. However, that might at some point get patched out. It doesn't particularly change much, as you will still have a truly obscene cash flow, since almost anything you pick up might as well be sold. I personally will be using the glitch to provide some more funds where needed, but I highly doubt if you just picked up everything and sold everything on a regular basis that you would have any problem whatsoever doing the exact same transactions, which you will eventually need to make. We may be a Rudy Nudie boy, but we are going to still need money. Around the corner again are two more vitally important NPCs. Firstly, this lady. I have no idea who you are. Apparently, according to the subtitles, your name is Octa. I wouldn't know. What I do know is if you choose to stop thinking about dwarf, that's another tasty inspiration. Before we get to the absolute star of the show, Auntie Motherfucking Ethel, who's here to give our leaf an inspection.
Auntie Ethel will sort you out. I've lotions and potions galore.
And far more importantly, in her inventory is a potion of invisibility. Another quick PSA. If you see these in any shop, you buy them. These things will be your bread and butter of survival. Treasure them, love them, and cherish them dearly. Next, we're off to pay a visit to Korga, but get interrupted mid-jump by Larry's precious DM princess. Our space hopper journey continues, and we're invited to go and see Korga after saving the grove from goblins that don't exist. I'm not sure this is necessary, but I stopped by Volo just to make sure that he would end up at the goblin camp for later, before we grab an essential fish and feed it to this bear to get them off of the elevator without needing animal speaking. 2 more bounces and we hit the first of our rough skill checks. Alfira, the bard, who's here to teach us about our instrument. Now, normally here is where most players would try and help her with the song and you get the lovely cutscene, etc. However, if you ask her to hand you the lute and perform together, you do get instrument proficiency. That is the only way to get that other than being a bard. We have 2 performance skill checks and you only need to succeed the second one. And weirdly, I'm allowed to add friends to this one, but not the other one. No idea why that's the case, but I'm not going to question it. Alfira is overcome by how we work our instrument and gives us the proficiency that we're after. I will note that I never actually ended up using this in the playthrough, but I think it's still worthy of your time to get, primarily because if Minor Illusion ever fails you, you can use Performance to get a similar effect of herding NPCs around. You don't even need an instrument, you can instead just whistle for a baboon. After that, it's down to a slightly different yet adjacent beach in order to pick up what I thought was going to be a valuable weapon. I'll happily point out you can skip this part, but I thought it was funny to include regardless. Plus, it does showcase one of the glitches that we will be using repeatedly throughout. It starts with sneaking up to Mirkon here, and the camera is fighting us, but the key technique is thus. Activate turn-based mode, and then go to throw your target. Note that you are going to need to be strong enough to actually lift them. Then, once you've clicked to throw them, immediately cancel it. It will take probably a couple of goes to do, but I happen to get it on the first try. What ends up happening is your character cancels the throwing action whilst the creature that you are attempting to lift is still technically in a lifted/held state, meaning you can just end turn-based and walk off with them. Hilariously, this also persists through teleporting, meaning that we now are carrying the child miles and miles from the Emerald Grove. Because they're now far enough from the Harpy encounter, they instantly die, leaving behind a pathetic little child's corpse. Ooh, corpse. I know what we do with those around here. Hang on a minute. No, sorry, wait, no, I'm watching the footage back live. Where did the Mind Flayer go? I put them in there. Who stole my Mind Flayer? And what's weirder, I know for a fact he comes back. Is my corpse box a portal to fucking Narnia? Regardless, I've derailed the session long enough. It's time to go and impress Korga with our snake.
Do it.
Instead of playing it safe as I should have, I instead bounced straight into the servants' quarters and got my hands on Korga's chest before breaking our friendship. Once back in the camp dimension, pop it on the ground, and time to give lockpicking a try. This is without fail one of the places where doing the merchant glitch will help you because you will have a much more thorough supply of lockpicks. However, again, if you've been picking up everything and selling it as you go, you probably will still have enough resources on hand. With Korga's secrets on display, take a chance to read this letter, and that will give you the breadcrumb trail to start dealing with the Grove shenanigans. To wit, we'll be helping ourselves a little bit out in the future by grabbing these rats, wormholing to the Emerald Grove environs, and just dropping them off with a nice view of the White Cliffs of Dover. Repeat this until you're out of rats, and check in on Nettie for a free Mind Flayer parasite. You're going to want to be around this corner before she enters the room, otherwise it will automatically start the cutscene. Thankfully, our girl Nettie is susceptible to Minor Illusion, as are so many NPCs in this world. If you have not tried this spell, my god. Well, apparently I'm allergic to illusory cats. The point being that most plot non-critical NPCs will go and investigate this cat, which is effectively the closest thing we'll be doing to combat for most of the game. We hoik the parasite and the accompanying drow, and row back to Spain like there's no mañana. With the drow safely stowed in the box, we bounce our way over to Edwin for another free parasite. These being some of the more Telltale-esque NPCs, where it's very hard to actually change how their interaction pans out. Meaning that we don't have to make any checks, and we can still grab Edwin's parasite. And Edwin himself, for good measure. in the box you go. Bounce, bounce, bounce up the river in order to find the absolute best boy possible. Like, I am absolutely serious. I cannot begin to tell you how important Scratch is going to be. Holy shit. This is what we need our inspirations for. And then I don't end up needing them. But the point still stands. Next up to conquer will be the Blighted Village, which is indeed why we took our Draconic Ancestry and set it to fire, because now we can become a Platinum Himbo! Using the exaggerated swagger of a Drow Lord, we easily pass our way through the goblins without any trouble whatsoever. Rinse and repeat for goblins nearer the camp, and attempting to saunter our way into the goblin camp before Shadowlard invites herself to the plot yet again. Now with 100% more insistent persistence despite our resistance.
You won't get much farther without you need me at your side. There's no chances without me.
Just shut the fuck up!
We give Volo a quick listen so we'll be able to rescue him later, and present ourselves for inspection by the guards at the door.
Oi! Ain't no party in here!
Grab a quick branding for later because why not? Convince a goblin to take a pigeon for a walk and bust our bardic bro free so that he can provide us that sweet perception buff later down the line. After turning into a Gith again, I thought I was going to deal with Priestess Gut, but she seems convinced she needs to rebrand me again, I guess because Disguised Self is a bit weird in this world. For some context, these are the same people who misunderstand 5e to the extent where Disguised Self can let you through small holes by just changing into a gnome. Which is not really how that spell works even slightly. But regardless, she will now be isolating herself, which is exactly what we're after. We close the door for some private time and ask her to help us clear our head. Sadly, the priestess is revealed to have studied at the Cosby School of Bards, and we wake up in chains in her attic. Wait for the opportunity to break your chains, and choose not to, since this leads to us getting saved by Saint Corilla, who also manages to take out the ogre on the way in as well. Fantastic. With Gut dead, that means that's 1 out of 3 already dealt with, a free parasite, and ooh, another addition for the box. With those shenanigans concluded, we can safely call that the first arc of the first part. That was the easy bit. Now it's gonna start getting a bit rougher. First and foremost, since our jump, our shove, and our throw all rely on strength, we are going to need to find a way to increase our strength. If I were allowing Respecs, this is where I would play as Astarian origin so that I could also get an extra potion from the Drow later down the line. However, since we're not doing that, it means we're going to have to start getting creative with Auntie Ethel. We start by hopping around the Outer Rim since we're already in the neighborhood to pick up Korga's blackmail note, and this is why we buy the Potion of Invisibility. Pop it onto your bar, prep your jump, your feather fall, and we're about to do a technique I refer to as dash stacking. The core is very simple. Because the game simultaneously runs a turn-based and a real-time system, you can apply dash in real time and it will last for, quote, a turn. Then you can turn on turn-based mode and still have your action and bonus action available whilst still under the effects of the dash buff, quote-unquote, for 1 turn. Meaning that you can bounce, move up to your dashed movement speed, dash again for extra movement speed, and get much further than you otherwise would in the space of a single turn. Open the tree, and for the love of Gale, do not pick this up. You read it. Do not pick it up, read it. If you pick it up, the invisibility will instantly end and you will be massacred. However, reading it, for some reason, doesn't count, meaning we're safely able to end our turn, wait for the vines to dissipate, and leg it the hell on out of dodge. Next up, at some point during your escapades in Ethel's Swamp, you will get asked if you want to perform a check to see through the illusion. Deliberately ignore this feeling, mostly because we want those red caps to stay as sheep. If you've been following me up until now, you can probably foresee why. It's safe to say their choice of disguise, and thus wait, was a bad move. Drop them off at the overgrown ruins so that their AI isn't inspired to walk back, given the intellect devourers are still alive and in the way. If you put them down at the Emerald Grove, they will just start pathing back home. So in the meantime, let's recruit Lump. There's a few ways to do this. Since we're branded, we don't have to deceive him that we're an ally. We can simply pay him if you've been stacking up your money and skip a check. I would strongly advise that if you want to, or you can be a twit like me and go for a persuasion check. Regardless, once you've got them on board, that's 3 uses of Lump & Co. to use as you wish. Although I fully admit I forgot where the horn was in my bag and completely forgot that I could use them at any point. Because I don't know if you've noticed by the fact I'm doing this at all, I might just be a moron. Yeah. Skipping ahead a bit, I've now accrued all the necessary sheep, ignore the flesh rot. Making my way back to Korga, the rats couldn't get their way through the door, so there will be no combat when you reveal her deception. Just whatever you do, make sure that you aren't flesh rotting from Ethel's Swamp before you do this check. I was, as exampled earlier, a moron and didn't do this, meaning I had to use friends just to bring disadvantage up to normal and hope for the best. After convincing Korga to go on the shallowest, most unearned redemption arc ever, Olodin professes their great power for a coming fight that doesn't happen. meaning we can immediately talk to Korga and end the questline. However, here in the darkness I shall impart upon you some cursed knowledge. Now that we have done this, you can never go back to the Emerald Grove Environs waypoint. Olodin and co are still there and now aggroed permanently. You are a level 1 sorcerer with no equipment and 6 HP. You will not survive. If you ever need to go back to the Emerald Grove, you go to Blighted Village and bounce your way on home. One slip and that's it. Just trust me on this. A quick check-in with Zevlor, grab the Hellrider's Pride for some extra cash, but what we're truly here for is this ladder, followed by this climbable rock, followed by this cliff, which allows us to simply jump straight on over, bypassing the entirety of the Risen Road to the Toll Collector's house, since this area contains 2 veritable gold mines for us. Firstly, Sorel, this trader, this lady right here. I know you often kill her when you kill the paladins, but this lady, remember this lady. And this, my lumpies and germs, is why. Grease Bottle and Smoke Powder Bomb. It may seem like nothing now, but you will come to love this woman. I promise you. Just as much as you will come to love what is beyond the ornate wooden hatch. The true treasure trove of Act 1. Boxes and wooden trunks in plentiful supply. Oh, it's a thing of beauty. Moving on. If we're going to take on Auntie Ethel and her masked horde, we're going to need weaponry. Not the kind of weaponry we can equip, but, you'll see what I mean. Simply sneak upon these traders, don't bother engaging them in conversation, a quick dash stack, turn into turn-based mode, grab their chest, and leg it on out of dodge. Congratulations, you have instantly acquired the absolute best one-use distraction tool in the early game. Where you personally choose to use it is down to you, but I chose to go for the masks just before Auntie Ethel's, as I specifically don't believe you can use Lump for those. I decided during my madness to pay a quick visit to the Zend so that I could use their trader to buy possibly more smoke powder, but again, that is behind a speech check. If you don't trust your abilities, do not go here, they will attack you. With Ethel's red cap safely removed, we can now make our way over to the tea house. Take a quick bounce up to this side entrance and sneak your way inside. You want to have 2 things here. You want to have a good straight shot at Ethel with a thrown object and a straight shot jump to where Connor's coffin is. I personally opted to start off somewhere where my character would need to walk forwards before doing the thrown animation to give me time to get the camera where I wanted it. Because of the fact the game is firstly going to try and trigger a finger wagging, you really shouldn't have thrown that. Then also the cutscene of Ethel transforming, and also conversation after Ethel transforming, it means that you should have enough of a window to jump to safety. Realistically, you only need to be out the back of Ethel's house. In a hilarious twist of fate, she doesn't seem to have a key to her own back door. With no targets nearby to attack and no red caps ready to call, Ethel's AI instead defaults straight to breaking the illusion and heading down into the basement, which is precisely what we want. I suppose you could technically fight her in the tea house, but there's no way from there to trigger the cutscene of getting her hair and thus the associated stat boost, so really you're barking up the rock. Barkus! Hold on, I forgot about Barkus. Wait, stay with me. I understand this might seem a bit extraneous, but Barkus being another possible vendor of smoke powder bombs and grease bottles and just generally tinker-based things, yeah, we kind of want him. He is, without question, one of the best NPCs that will save our run.
Cut me loose!
And since we're back in the Blighted Village anyway, drop a quick firebolt on this piece of web and hop on down into the workshop below. Did you think it was long enough since we'd had the invisibility shenanigans with the wood woads? Oh, baby. Oh, we've got to sneak past eticaps and spiders now, and it's not going to be fun. Do not step on the webs. But we do want 2 things from down here. Firstly, the Dark Amethyst for the Necromancy of Thay, and also, on top of that, an entrance to the Underdark so we can grab the waypoints for the Myconid colony. After one scooties the booty past the eticaps, it's pretty much just a case of hiding behind this rock until everybody's vision cones are just in the right place that you can hop straight over, grab the Dark Amethyst, and then hop straight down the hole without anybody seeing you. I'm now going to skip ahead a couple of hours just to spare us the pain of a lot of long rest spamming, shopping, grabbing the Myconid colony, and general Underdark exploration, and catching us back up breaking into Ethel's main chamber. This right here is one of the main reasons that we play Githyanki. The ability to summon Mage Hand, but invisible. It is able to go around the edge and touch the control orb to lower Mayrina's cage. Then you're going to want to make it attack the ground so it does actually become visible and starts the combat with Ethel. She'll bravely attempt to summon her masks, but thankfully the spectator from the iron flask we picked up earlier has been dealing with them quite nicely. You can then safely dismiss the Mage Hand in order to drop combat. Once that's done, I won't lie to you, it's not pretty. What we need to do is get Ethel to follow over towards the noxious fumes of her own traps. This has a realistically quite high chance of getting us killed due to her enormous vision cone, But at the same time, this isn't a fight we can safely ignore, since we do need the extra strength this will provide. After a lot of back and forth, I managed to get her stuck between these two clouds of noxious fumes, whereupon she, well, didn't really seem to care if I threw objects at her. By this point, I had accrued quite a lot of alchemist fire, acid vials, and one rotten wheel of cheese that did a frankly astounding amount of damage. I truly do wish I could give you a hard and fast logic of how to get Ethel stuck here, but I'll be straight with you, this one's just luck. The key ingredient here is, however, without a doubt, Alchemist Fire. Because Larian based this game so heavily on Divinity Original Sin 2, they also ported over their obsessive love of surfaces, meaning that even with the worst rolls in the world, there is now a guaranteed source of damage, and a guaranteed source of damage over time status effects. We don't need to throw an Alchemist Fire at Ethel every single turn, we just need to refresh the burn. It will eventually lower her to the point where her cutscene begins, offering us power. But since we're not planning to link up with Mayrina in Act 3, we can be an absolute bastard and just give her straight over, bypassing the check entirely, and big ol' Bumdiada, 1 extra point of strength. And it only cost a significant amount of sanity. After officially becoming the first of these runs to successfully get past Auntie Ethel at all, is where I decided this character had finally earned some customization. With Ethel dealt with, I can also start cleaning up some loose plot threads I kinda left dangling, such as what on earth was the point of solving the Emerald Grove? Well, once you get them to stop doing the ritual, as long as you're sleight of handy enough, you can grab the Idol of Sylvanas, which for as long as you're holding it, grants an effectively permanent proficiency bonus to animal handling and nature checks. I don't actually remember any of these coming up, but I thought I would need it at the time. I was flying blind on a wing and a prayer at this point, sue me. Next up, how to deal with that Thar Goblin camp. Well, there's no pretty way around this, we're gonna have to start talking about physics. Specifically, the strange physics applied to wooden trunks, my beloved. For you see, the humble wooden trunk operates on a different plane of existence than the rest of us, acting similarly to its cousin, the wooden crate, but being able to be stacked in stairs because it's a rectangle and not a square.
Oh no!
And with that, you've given me access to a staircase as tall as I can find trunks. Or so I thought. I'm pretty sure it's obvious to all and sundry what I'm going to be doing here by combining the techniques we've learned thus far. I create a staircase of trunks, I use minor illusion to pull the NPCs up those trunks, and then I either push them off the trunks or simply put the trunks back into my inventory in turn-based mode, thus removing the floor that the NPC was standing on and they fall to their doom. That's fine. That makes sense. What makes significantly less sense is Larian's understanding of physics, which I'm almost certain was imported from Divinity Original Sin 2, which I hope you'll humour me as I briefly expand. We need first to talk about Solasta. See, Solasta, Crown of the Magister, is another game that was adapting 5e, which means that their approach to flying was significantly different. They effectively created standable quote-unquote space in every square inch of the game space, ground level, but also up and down. Whereas to Larian, on the other hand, flight is not flight. Flight is merely an enhanced jump. This is the same reason you cannot fly in the air, you can only fly as if it were a jump. Where I'm going is, under any normal immersive sim game physics, if I create a tower of boxes, I should be able to walk on the boxes. However, in Larian land, I can only walk on the boxes if there was normally walkable ground underneath where that box currently is, regardless of its height. If I start extending the boxes out over a chasm, they will either not be walkable or will instantly destroy themselves. If I start extending them over water, the same sort of deal. And most annoyingly, the same also being true if the tower extends over parts of the ground that include unwalkable or unclimbable scenery, such as, say, a campfire or a piece of normal wood. At this point in the playthrough, I had yet to come to understand this fully. I just knew that some areas I could build a tower and it oddly wouldn't be walkable. Some areas I could build the exact same height of tower and it would be walkable. So by hook and crook, we eventually drop Minthara in a hole, steal her parasite, all of her gear, and her very corpse for sheer unparalleled bad manner. We then drop in on Joragslin, and because our wisdom is so absolutely dog, we don't have any significant chance of overriding his ritual. Instead, we're going to let him complete the ritual, which in turn causes a persuasion check. Ooh, we're a bit better at those. Using some quick stealth, I managed to snag us the Mind Flayer corpse, which I then store right next to the Mind Flayer corpse. See, I told you it'd turn up again. We then repeat the same process for Joragslin as for Minthara, with one key exception. For reasons, I'll be honest, I'm still unclear on, the second Joragslin dies. No matter how, nor where he dies, the entire goblin camp will permanently aggro onto you. no matter what. This also including the goblins outside the camp itself. I got nothing. Regardless, we're going to make sure that we drink an invisibility potion, with huge shout-outs to Darylin down in the Myconid colony for providing this, meaning we're left just enough of a window to safely teleport away, back, steal the parasite, steal the man himself, and leg it on home to the Emerald Grove for our greatest reward. No, not you, Zevlor. This warehouse. Because it contains wooden trunks, baby! Oh yes, it's so exciting that even physics started to break down. I've got nothing. Since dealing with everything, we stop by Wrath, get a tablet, plug that into this wolf, and gain access to an extra secret stash. While most would be down here for the excellent glaive this contains, we're down here for... Around here is where I realized for all my preparations I'd actually forgotten to pick up the Necromancy of Thay, so we stop by Ellie's workshop, make sure to grab the cheeky Quasit scroll, and roll a simple speech check to get through the enchanted mirror. Hop over the traps, and the Necromancy of Thay is now yours. We will open this eventually, just not for a while. With the Goblin and Tiefling scenarios sorted, it's now safe to head to the Monastery and set up one of our strongest weapons for Act 2. I just bounce straight on around and walk out like nothing ever happened. Because of the mandatory long rest between Act 1 and the Monastery, we finally get the cutscene that lets us use our tadpoles. So we make sure to plug them into favorable beginnings for speech checks and basically anything with a knockback effect. Enough time has also gone by that Volo can use his ice pick and oddly pixelated beard to give us a new eye for extra perception and seeing invisibility. It is unquestionably important that we keep petting Scratch so that eventually we get his ball and associated summon before checking in at Lady Esther. Skipping ahead a while, there is no combats or speech checks in between the start of the monastery and the Gith at the door, but having made our way inside, the crucial person to visit is the lady with the Zaithisk, since she has not 2 but 3 Mind Flayer parasites and the Zaithisk itself, which, should we pass, will give us access to all of our parasite abilities on a bonus action. Unfortunately, passing didn't go quite so well for me. I made a quick stop at the Emerald Grove to finish up business, went to the Inquisitor's chambers, and hopped inside the Astral Plane. Here, within this cave, is the reason that we even bothered with the monastery to begin with. Provided you make nicey-nicey with your Dream Guardian, you walk out of the cave with this buff. This being a semi-permanent Bless buff until next long rest for a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls, and most importantly, saving throws. The catch with this being, as long as Lae'zel is in your party, there is a mandatory long rest and associated cutscene while Kithrak Voss comes and tells her about her religion. However, if Lae'zel is not around, this does not trigger, meaning you can just safely walk off and keep the buff. But, dear viewer, if you've made it this long, you know by now power comes with a price. And that price is that we need to leave, despite the entire creche soon being aggroed on us. So we make sure to buff up, dash stack, and turn-based mode before entering the material plane again. Since we're in turn-based mode at the moment of passing through the portal, we remain in this state once we come out the other side, meaning the cutscene doesn't instantly trigger. And thus meaning we can just bugger off, leaving us free to enter Lathander's basement and do the unthinkable.
Everything is in motion. All within these walls are doomed to destruction unless you act.
For you see, dear viewer, I may have rescued Balin in the Underdark, but inside the bag he asks you to retrieve for him, there are not 1 but 2 scrolls of Misty Step. And this barrier meant to be overcome with party members does not prevent Misty Step.
Somewhere between a nice summer's day and the full concentrated power of the sun! Now, shall we go? Or do you have any other chaos you need to unleash here?
But leaving our war crimes aside for happier matters, it's time to pop down to the Myconid colony and chat with Sovereign Spore. I will fully confess here that I forgot to capture footage of me killing Gek Cole, but for full context, I did kill them in exactly the same way as Draw Ragzlin and Minthara. Build a tower of boxes, make sure it covers no stones, no campfires, no water, because Larian are weird about the concept of up, and drop him to his doom. And you're definitely going to want to hand in this quest because of the buff that we get as a reward. Bliss Spores. Which, adds a, free 1d6 to basically any check? Until next long rest? Dearie me. After that, we hop aboard Gek's raft, do a quick branded persuasion to convince Darkwall Greymon that we're one of them, and head into the Grymforge. Now, the main bread and butter of how we're going to be dealing with this place is a deal with Elder Brithvar here. who has just one basic simple request. Please would we kindly remove the scrying eye so that when Nier is freed we can have a little rebel riot and get him dead. Simple task, but our man Gith Yankovic, sorcerer of nudism, is a man of commitment and passion, I say. Why stop at just removing the scrying eye when every servant of the Absolute in the area could meet with, just a series of tragic accidents. Yeah, definitely accidents. Nope, nothing suspicious here. Stop looking at me. Just like there's nothing suspicious about where that barrel of room powder went. Nope. And the vial that she was carrying? Nope. No, don't know where they went. Haven't seen him. Are you sure they were ever there? Are you sure you're getting enough sleep? Is everything all right at home? And also, just for funsies, I thought I'd do Stonemason Kith's little checks. Sadly, didn't pass them first time, but I did open his trading window and... in the twinkling of far too long, it was finally time to free Nier from a considerable distance away, and up a staircase hiding behind a wall. If around this point you're starting to wonder why I'm even bothering with Grymforge, I might just quickly remind you that Barkus Root is still technically imprisoned by Nier at this point, so we do need to bust him out so that he can move to Last Light in Act 2 and become a vendor there. Nier lasted a staggeringly long time, really putting those honor mode actions to work, but in the end, succumbing finally to action economy and one very well placed firebolt that definitely wasn't a kill steal, Nier finally meets his end and we're able to convince the Dwergar to let the gnomes go, finally assuring and securing that sexy smoke powder sugar daddy that we've always wanted deep down.
I'm sure you would.
And with that, after nearly 40 edited minutes of Act 1 pissing about, which I can only apologize for, it was finally time to say a heartfelt goodbye to these hallways and waypoints that had become so very familiar, as we made our way into Act 2, using the Underdark entrance that doesn't mandate a long rest, meaning we'll be keeping those buffs just a little longer. However, the happiness was to be short-lived, because Act 2 would present one of our greatest challenges yet. How the ever-loving fuck do I cross that hot mess without the light of Lathander, or even being able to equip a torch? And yes, I hear your voices already shouting at me to cast light on myself. However, light is not cast on oneself, it is cast on one's weapon, something we don't have. In fact, light can only be cast on items. Oh dear. Oh dear. But thankfully, as history has shown us, when in a fantasy setting all looks lost, you can look to the east at first light on the 5th day of Ed trying to figure this shit out. And without fail, you will find a wizard willing to lend you a hand. Yes, I'm deadly serious. Yes, I know how it looks. And yes, this is how we're doing it. One very tense and epic odyssey of bouncing later, we were finally at the closest southern point one can get to Moonrise before entering the advanced darkness where even a light source won't help you. And if you're wondering, no, I also don't have any clue why I didn't just go and get the moon lantern and thus dolly dolly. Or at least go to Last Light and grab the waypoint. All I can say is at this point, I was becoming increasingly unhinged. With a bit of dash stacking and an 18 strength jump, you can actually make it from the southernmost entrance to the actual entrance of Moonrise Towers, and thus its bubble of safety, without the Shadow Curse getting even a single tick of damage on you. And having slithered our way inside by virtue of being the Dark Urge, it was now time to begin the strangeness of Act 2 proper. For you see, there's only realistically 3 things you need to do. Number 1, free or kill the Night Song. Number 2, fight Ketheric on the rooftop. Number 3, fight Ketheric in the basement. If you are a speedrunner and good enough at this specific jump, you don't actually need to do the second part. However, much to all of our chagrins, I am not a speedrunner. I'm a moron. I wasn't able to do that. On top of which, I also did need to do the rooftop encounter with Ketheric so that I could make the check easier, and I believe even make the check at all, to skip the first phase once we got to the colony. If you thought I spent far too long on Act 1, I'll give you a glimmer of hope right here, which is that I'll be skip-forwarding through most of Act 2, since you can kind of expect the shape it'll take, namely minor illusion and pushing a lot of people off a lot of ledges. But I will throw up a couple of little highlights. Firstly, an extra Mind Flayer parasite by dropping into this oubliette and finding this corpse. Completely missed that one the first time I played through, and I'm sure other people did as well, so if you didn't know about it, there it is. In a similar vein, there's a couple of extra parasites you can find in this Zentarim barrel on this dock here. And oddly, no matter where you put the barrel, the cutscene will still think that you're on the dock. We stopped by Roa Moonglow to have a gander at their... You can use your tadpole compulsions to make this gnoll eat this Lincella and get a free parasite that way. Also some bonus dialogue and friendly furry boys if you happen to be the Dark Urge. And one thing I must point out because you are going to need it. You're going to want to break into this bedroom and open this chest and read this letter, which lowers the DC of Ketheric's first check dramatically, like from a 30 to a 10 kind of dramatically. And you're specifically going to want to do this before you walk into Ketheric's throne room and start his cutscene, if you even do that step at all. Once that cutscene is finished, Squire the dog will be patrolling around this bedroom, but until that point, other than one mimic in another room you can sneak past, it's free real estate, baby. At some point, I finally remembered to go grab Dolly Dolly, which was made significantly easier by being a sorcerer and the aforementioned bliss spores, before checking in at last light to make sure our essential vendors are present. Namely, Mattis the Urchin, which is why we rescued the Tieflings, and Barkus Root, our best bald baller. Regardless, after a lot of shoving, it's eventually time to stop by the Mausoleum and the Gauntlet of Shar, the first trial of which is hilariously simple and hard countered by just jumping. Our first actual trial comes instead in the form of these skeletons. You're going to want to drop a minor illusion so you don't cross their line of sight, causing the cutscene which will cause the Justiciars to spawn and aggro. No, I don't know why they're already spawned, and no, I don't know why they don't care that I'm here. That's just how Act 2 rolls. But sadly, with that out of the way, we enter the gauntlet of my absolute greatest failure. Remember how I said I hadn't quite fully understood earlier the war crimes of how wooden trunks worked with walkable ground? Here is where I was taught that in a deeply painful lesson. Because I didn't want to deal with the self-same trial, I tried so desperately to get a good jump going over to the second door that requires umbral orbs, because if I could skip needing the first one, I would thus only need 3, not 4. What deeply hurts me is I know that I've done this before on a previous playthrough. I think I might have used an error of transposition though, which understandably would require equipping a crossbow and thus not possible in this challenge. The rest of the trials were simplicity itself. A few jumps and a lockpick deals quite easily with the soft step trial, and the whole only penitent man may pass business was pretty easily dealt with by simply clicking on the corner of the platform and letting the autopath sort it out for me. I have no idea why this hasn't been patched so many thousands of bug fixes later, but it just works. We also had a new problem brewing on the horizon in the form of Balthazar. However, in my unhinged, sleep-deprived state, I had a terrible idea, that being to start the combat with the ridiculously spawning amount of Justiciars and then bugger off. Meaning that for the rest of my escapades in the Shar dungeon, those Justiciars would 1. Kill all the skeletons, and 2. Kind of just keep spawning. We'll come back to them later. Meanwhile, Raphael's Demon Brethren was probably the absolute simplest to solve. Provided you're a Gith Yankee, you can use an invisible mage hand to glide straight on over to the Umbral Orb, pick it up, and lob it over to yourself. This will inevitably reveal the mage hand and start combat with all the demons, but you don't have to be involved in that combat, meaning you can simply sneak and grab the orb. You are, however, going to want to teleport out as soon as possible, because there's a displacer beast on the way, and it will notice you. And it will kill you. You have 6 HP and a leaf. Do not try this. After grabbing all of the umbral orbs that I thought I would need, we now come to the arc of my great shame. Because there's only walkable ground where there's walkable ground, regardless whether you're up or down in Larian land, there was no way I could build any tower of boxes that would extend over the edge and still be usable. I even tried edging it. Keep your mind out of the gutter. Stop it. No. I mean putting it around the edges where there was still land. I thought maybe it just had to not count as a chasm. Unfortunately, no. Since that is just scenery and not walkable ground, even if you're standing on a perfectly flat box that is suspended over it, you still aren't able to stand on it, and thus there was nowhere I could position myself that even an enhanced jump would reach as far as I needed it to. Meaning I had but one recourse. I had to do the self-same trial. Which, by all rights, shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, I'm level 1, and I'm not wearing any gear, so it would copy a level 1 not wearing any gear. Right? It has to. No. We don't need to think about that right now. I remember there was a glitch I read about once where you could just walk and glitch through the big Shar door, right? That got... I think it got patched. Oh, that's not good. Okay, that's, right. Well, okay. It's fine, I just need to walk up behind my clone and... Oh no. In the end, this was another of those roadblocks that I mentioned. The only thing I could do to have even a hope in the face of this was to use the cheeky closet and scratch, hiding and hoping for the best. I'll be entirely honest, I have no suggestions for you here. This was completely luck, and I will own that as such. The AI just continued to derp and failed to see through my hiding. I also took the liberty of starting the trial, then forfeiting the trial so I could come back and grease the floor before it started. That didn't help too much in the end, but it made me feel better, so I guess that's a win. And with that, our last Umbral Orb is earned, which I shouldn't have had to earn in the first place if there was any semblance of actual flight in this world. Larian, I love you, but why? Why? To make myself feel better, I took a little holiday and took my rage out on the occupants of the Moonrise prison, meaning that in passing, I could also free Wilbrim Bongle, fuck Wilbrim Bongle, and in doing so unlock the brilliant retort from our boy Barkus. I also made an invisible stop by the Shrine of Shar and dropped myself down to attempt the Wisdom saving throw that would net us a +5 in Wisdom. Thanks to the beautiful combo of Bliss and Bless, we were able to succeed, meaning we're in the best position possible to finally read the Necromancy of Thay, and I still failed! It's fine, it doesn't bother me, it bothers me a lot. It was with great reluctance I went back to Act 1 and made sure to pick up Shadow Tart. Not because she's necessary for the plot like she insists, but that she is potentially necessary for a truly, deeply stupid check in Act 3 that we might need in the box. Since we were now so inflated on our saving throws, I also thought it'd be a good idea to drop by Omeluum and complete the questline to try and get the Survival of the Fittest perk, just in case I might need that extra turn of survival. Which also meant that we were in the Myconid colony for me to discover something unfortunate. I was absolutely convinced there was a way to get Glut from the Underdark to the Act 2 overworld, in which case I could use him to animate Myrkon's corpse with spores. Yes, there was a reason I picked up the Tiefling child earlier. I promised I would get back to it. Because children are special and as long as they're not goblin children, you are fully allowed to kill those ones. But Tiefling children that you're meant to feel sorry for cannot be involved in combat the same way normal creatures can. Meaning it would, in theory, be possible to reanimate Myrkon, give him the Light of Lathander, and have him kick the other-loving snot out of Balthazar. Unfortunately, none of this worked, because I could not wrestle Glut into Act 2, meaning, Gale preserve us, I'd have to improvise. And so improvise I did, with the nearest and scariest weapon to hand, and to perversely paraphrase Blue Peter, here's some I prepared earlier. Yep, this was my strategy. Sneak around the Dark Justiciars, lockpick the door to engage Balthazar in their combat, hide as best I can, as he learned an operatically long lesson in basic action economy. And that was it. Balthazar was dead. Nothing left but the point of no return, and the inevitable 2 fights with Ketheric Thorm. So the time had finally come to let go of our buffs. Because I'll be straight with you, there's no way a level 1 sorcerer is beating the literal avatar of Myrkul, at least without a lot of explosives. Normally, this is where most runs would then go lol, hashtag Larian Games, hashtag Barrelmancy, hashtag Rothel, and call it a day. There's one problem with Barrelmancy. You need to hold the barrels. How do Barrelmancers get around this? Simple. Have a party member hold the barrels, because there's no weight limit on transferring items directly from character to character. Can you see the problem yet? So we needed a more transportable form of explosive. And to make that dream real, we'd need to sleep a lot. And so it was that the rogue true soul would hit the shops and sleep on repeat for an unspeakable amount of time. Days would be but a memory, weeks long forgotten, months dare I say. On this dreadfully time-sensitive quest to save the Sword Coast, we would spend, collectively, probably verging on a year shopping.
I'm sure you would.
In order to accrue 60 smoke powder bombs. This is around the point where I should have just gone to sleep, but it was too hot and I gave up on the concept entirely. I was going to stay awake until either Al was dead or I was done. Additionally, because of the traders involved, this meant that I could grab more than enough invisibility potions and alchemist fires to see us through for basically the rest of the game. After Ketheric, never again would stealth or combat be an issue. Don't think about the Gith ambush. As long as we could take the big boner down, it would be smooth sailing through Gortash. Don't think about the Gith ambush. Orin, don't think about the Gith ambush. And all the way to the goddamn Netherbrain itself. We made our way inside the Shadowfell, extremely reluctantly saved Aelin, and she offered us a choice of weapon that wasn't actually a choice, it's just a glaive, I don't know why she said choice, and made our way to Ketheric's boss fight, which I had already covered in Greece during the whole Moonrise murder moment. Turns out most of those skeletons that populate his rooftop fight, yeah, they're just already there, and then when it comes to combat, it's just him and the skeletons he summons at the literal time. But that couldn't be a problem. Aelin's immortal, right? Oh god. Yeah, Ketheric's rooftop fight is a weird one, and no mistake. So to even try and explain what you're looking at, first order of business being, the Necromites only join the combat if they see you. Ketheric will just keep spawning more of them, and they won't go anywhere. They will just form a nice and orderly queue. The next problem being that because of the way Larian has decided standing up from prone should take your action, instead of half your movement speed, which it's supposed to, Aelin can't attack. The oh-so-powerful daughter of the Moon Maiden almost certainly will get knocked on her ass every single turn by Ketheric, before regenerating her hit points the next turn, getting up, not taking any action, and immediately getting slapped back down like a game of fucking whack-a-mole. Which means our only source of damage against Immortal Ketheric Thorm is his own AoE. His own AoE that comes from him spawning his own skeletons, which don't even join the fight, and yet he keeps on summoning them, and he keeps on hurting himself. I have no idea why this is even possible, but yes, over a painfully long time doing 1s and 2s of damage to himself, bearing in mind he also has damage reduction and resistance to necrotic damage, he very slowly wore himself down until I could stand close enough to trigger the transition cutscene. This took so long. You would not believe me if I began to tell you. But that hollowing itch for a proper BG3 challenge was not yet satisfied. We had to go deeper. We had to fight him at the heart of the Mind Flayer colony. Thankfully, there are no combats on the way. We head down the tower, grab the key to release us, the best brain kitty. Yes, there was a reason we picked them up earlier. And psychologically prepared ourselves to attempt to blitz Ketheric Thorm. I'd like to take a moment as we approach this point of no return to just thank anybody who's still watching this. Most people will have given up long ago, given this is a considerably longer video than people beating the game even by aggressively walking at things. If you're still here, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. It means so very much to share this pain with you, and I thank you for listening. So now let's go into why I picked up Scratch. For you see, Scratch is, as far as I can tell, the only summonable companion that has the help action. I don't know why a dog has the help action and not the Quasit that probably should have the help action, but no, only Scratch can do this. Us also cannot do this. It is only Scratch. And in order to free Aelin, and in order to turn off Ketheric's invulnerability, you need to have someone go to her and use the help action. Oh boy. This means that we're going to need to go into this combat with as many hands on deck as possible. And by hands, I literally mean hands. We're also going to need the invisible mage hand. Trust me, he'll come in handy later. We make sure to bunch everyone possible up and throw invisibility potions at the floor so that we can even turn the dog invisible. The positioning is key here. We need Scratch over at Aelin, then we'll walk over invisible and stealthily lay our piles of bombs ready to be oh dear. Yeah, invisibility is meant to break on taking an action. Unfortunately, even though it isn't counted as an action, dropping items on the floor will also break invisibility. Oh, cock. So yes, I fully admit that I am saved here by some truly blessed initiative rolls. If you are doing this yourself for some unfathomable reason, make sure to find a better way of doing it than this. If you are hit once, you will die. However, under current circumstances, we are left free and at liberty to lay the rest of our smoke powder bombs, the rune powder barrel for good measure, disengage, and leg it on out of dodge, leaving our brilliant mage hand to go full kamikaze helldiver and blow away the avatar of a literal god with none other than Barcus's brilliant retort. Barcus Root. Deep Gnome. Devoted friend. Indirect slayer of gods. And so, in the face of a telekinetic nudist, his dog, and a tectonic amount of firepower, Ketheric Thorm, the undisputed best villain in the game, never stood a chance.
Who? Oh, right. Well, forget about that, McGungus. We have more important things to worry about.
Oh god.
We're under attack. Help me.
Scum! That's a cat!
I didn't think about the Gith ambush. It was a beautiful summer's evening. Marred only slightly by Jaheira having invited herself along for some reason. And this small segment of Castle Rampart would very soon, very nearly, be dear Owl's grave. The facts were these. As soon as I initiate the mandatory long rest between Acts 2 and 3, technically 2.5 things are going to happen. 1, a timed event will start wherein the Absolute is trying to overtake my mind, bombarding us continuously with psychic damage, and we have only a few turns to get to safety. That's already a problem. However, number 2 is probably the more terrifying option. Monks. Specifically, Way of the Elements monks. Meaning, they have high dexterity and thus very good initiative rolls, a disgusting amount of movement and bonus action potential, and if it wasn't bad enough, ranged attacks. I would have to somehow cross this tiny yet enormous gauntlet without taking a single hit from a single monk. And that's even if I'm allowed to get my turn. I'm not gonna bullshit you here. If I had been less sleep deprived, I would have just said, this is where I would drink an elixir of vigilance. I would break my rules because +5 to initiative in a game that only bases its initiative off a d4 roll, not a d20, is not to be sneezed at when you're trying to outpace monks. Unfortunately, it was currently about 3 in the morning and I had lost all sense of reality. So instead of doing sensible things like accepting mortal limits and putting aside a challenge just this one time, this one really obnoxious encounter, no, my brain went for some reason to Les Miserables. Will you give all you can give so that our playthrough may advance? Many fell, but this one lived. Will you stand up and take the chance? Cause if you don't nail this, the Gith Yankee will kick your ass. Alright, okay, I'll spare your ears. Just, I'm tired, cut me some slack. But I was only half joking. My core principle was to combine everything we have learned thus far, building as vertically tall yet horizontally shallow a tower as possible so I could best utilize my newfound dark knowledge of Larian struggling with the concept of up, to get enough height without sacrificing enough movement speed that I wouldn't be able to jump. Just smear grease on every surface, everywhere that could possibly be where I won't be spawning in, so that maybe the Giths would immediately fall prone upon spawning in. This was admittedly a bit of a harebrained idea, but I was throwing mad science at the wall to see what would stick. Laying out items that my mage hand could make use of. Yes, I was going to be summoning mage hand. The original reason I intended to do this was because of a speedrunning tech wherein you can bypass the entire second encounter with the Emperor and the monks in the big skull. However, minor spoiler alert if you haven't noticed, I'm not very good at this, and that didn't end up working. Also, even if it had, I'm not certain I could have managed it. You need to kill a character in order to break the cutscene, and the only character is Owl. Yeah, the more I talk about that, the more I realize that was probably never going to work. By now, we're greased, our tower's erect, and our hand is ready. Against my better judgment, the fated long rest would eventually come. I embraced it, spawned in, and was incredibly lucky that the very first thing the very first Gith did was fall flat on their ass and losing their entire turn because of Larian's weird approach to prone. The second Gith succeeded all of their saves but was stymied by the barricade, and final one slipped and fell onto the wet stairs below. From here, I would have a grand total of 1 turn to make this work. I started by extremely carefully summoning the mage hand so that it wouldn't lose its invisibility. A quick flight over, I threw a potion of speed so it would cover both the hand and also myself, meaning that there was now a second action available to throw a potion of glorious vaulting onto Al himself. Our total resource pool now stood at 1 action and 1 bonus action. It was time to make like the game Catherine and climb. Up here at the top of the tower is where I realized the wrinkle of not having bought any Featherfall potions. Had I had any on hand, I could have just thrown one at the floor and given myself the effect. Mysteriously, despite the game literally telling me it would happen, didn't go prone. Who knows at this point? I can only assume that Al acquired titanium knees. I counterintuitively ran a short distance away from the portal before then running back to the portal. This was so that I could try and implement the speedrun tech I mentioned earlier, namely spam clicking on a summon just before a cutscene begins so that you can control the summon instead of the character automatically going through the cutscene. As mentioned earlier, this didn't work, but oh my lord, am I glad I knew about it. You'll see why later. Getting around the Gith in the astral plane wasn't any trouble at all given their present concern with the intellect devourers. A short hop on down to the skull, it's finally time to throw on the Emperor's groove and find yet another wrinkle in the plan. Normally, after walking past a certain point, one is wormholed into a conversation with the Emperor, which then immediately leads into confrontation with the Gith. However, as mentioned earlier, I do not have decent initiative rolls. I have 5 HP and a leaf. The combat you are forced into starting when finishing conversation with the Emperor automatically breaks all invisibility you may have had before the cutscene triggered. I presume because you need to be visible, theoretically, for the forced conversation to happen. So it does this by removing the invisible condition from you and not reapplying it before the combat begins. I may have already used my mage hand, and despite it being a cantrip, for some reason Larian says that you can't use it until next long rest. But that's not the only little friend that we can summon, now is it? We may not be able to prepare ourselves, but maybe we don't have to. To answer this, and I can't believe I'm saying this, we're going to need to talk about parallel universes. For you see, cutscenes of plot-relevant conversation and actual game space are technically separate from one another. This is the same reason why if you are playing co-op and you shove your friend who's in a conversation, unless you shove them far enough to break that conversation, you will see them move, but they won't see themselves move. In the same vein, this is why certain cutscenes are pre-programmed to have your character standing in a certain place, or the camera work in a certain place. Remember that barrel from the dock? Yeah, that actually comes in relevant. Where I'm going with this is that any notion of invisibility we may have is turned off by the cutscene beginning so that we can be visible for the Emperor's cutscene. However, once that cutscene has started, our two realities have diverged. They will later re-intersect when the combat begins, but until that moment, we can apply buffs to Al, which he can then take into the combat with him. Meaning the optimal strategy of survival would not be to turn invisible before the conversation, it'll just get removed because of petty DMing. Instead, we begin the conversation and use the speedrun tech from earlier to force control over onto Scratch and us whilst Al becomes trapped inside the conversation cutscene. And therefore, class, if we simply leave on the ground a couple of potions that we would like to provide Al, we can then have our pets move those potions, destroy those potions, and provide Al buffs for him to take through and hopefully survive at least the first turn. All we need to do is survive. As far as I remembered. Those of you well versed in BG3 on higher difficulties will probably have already figured out the wrinkle that I so stupidly missed until it was almost too late. I've been focusing on my survival, but there's another player in this game who also needs to survive the combat. If the Emperor dies, it's instant game over. Meaning against all common sense and strategy, our nudie noodle boy will have to actually participate in combat for the purposes of slowing down, spreading out, and maybe even taking out a couple of Gith so that the Emperor and us, not that us, this us, all survive the night. Making this without any hyperbole the most difficult, complicated, and luck-based encounter, even more so than the Gith ambush we literally just had. This is a back-to-back first and second place scenario we are living through here, people. And at 3 to 4 in the morning, it was hell. Much as the self-same trial before it, I have nothing for you here. I was lucky. These Gith and Gish ended up standing in stupid places, next to stupid holes. I got stupid rolls, and could shove them to their doom with enough space to leg it and hope for the best. Which is what I did. It's all I did. I glided through here on gritted teeth, a wing, a prayer, and a very tightly clenched butthole. There is a condition in BG3 known as against all odds. It is activated upon succeeding the game's single 99 DC check. For this combat to have panned out as it did, at this time of day, at this time of year, in this part of the country, localized entirely within my stupid honor mode save, was truly the embodiment, for me, of against all odds. With the Gith surprisingly dead, and Al astoundingly still standing, the Emperor offered us a choice to evolve. A choice I happily took. And with this, we would have access to the greater ring of abilities. There was almost no reason to use most of them, but there were a key few that we could make some good use of. First and without question being Illithid Expertise, granting expertise in persuasion, deception, and intimidation. Yes, at our level it is merely a flat bonus of another 2, but it's all we can get right now. We also would gain access to a Displacer Beast shape, allowing us 85 effective hit points, once per long rest. Oh my, yes please. Lastly, I grabbed Psionic Dominance just in case someone, for some reason at this point, was casting a level 1 or 2 spell nearby, and Black Hole for some extra knockback if I found a use for it. And grabbing a trophy edition for our box. We were finally, officially, in Act 3, motherfucker. I'll tell you no lie when I say that Act 3 and I have had a rocky relationship since day 1 of the game's release. But gale above, I was happy to see it today. I made a specific point of going to this cliff and making my way over here in the faint hope that this time the game wouldn't bolt the snot rag Yenna to me against my will. A few short bounces across the rooftops and we start hearing a rumbling. But that can wait. We need to visit our boy Barkus, who has one final present for us. Emboldened by my growing depravity and increasing unhingedness, I strolled straight into the war room of the Deep Gnome Rebellion, stole their rune powder bomb, and then buggered off. Back on the rooftops, I jumped down, was accosted by a guard, and then immediately ignored instructions to stay put and just bounced straight around them. These guards desperately need to be fired. A little more hot foot jump work later, and I was inside the castle, whereupon I was ambushed by a cutscene of my own past. Unfortunately, this meant that any attempts at stealth were also broken by something called a Baal avatar that was apparently nearby. If you can find it, congratulations. I had no idea what was going on. What it did mean was that a guard burst through the door, found me in a restricted area, and it was time to put that Illithid expertise to good use, breezing straight past the check to be granted free passage. That is, until the guard immediately decided this was still a restricted area despite the conversation I had just finished with them. Because in my foolhardiness, I had forgotten that Act 3 is indeed made of Act 3. So instead, I swallowed my pride and paid some money to be shown the door. This time, taking the far more sensible route of jumping off a bridge, followed by abusing some wonky flight pathing to ignore the drawbridge altogether and enter the castle through the front door this time. Due to being the Dark Urge, we got an instant invite to Gortash's coronation, popped upstairs to see the man himself, and got told that we had a spy in our camp. Which, I won't lie, is genuinely impressive for Orin's forces, given that our camp currently numbers myself and one skeleton. With that, Gortash was knighted, I threw myself from the battlements, and made my way to Baldur's Gate's lower city. If I got my way, my time in Act 3 would be short-lived indeed. We were beelining directly to Orin. Just as soon as I'd finished breaking into Sorcerer Sundry's, that is. We blitzed our way past the security to get up to Lorokan's chambers. By letting him know that we would totally, definitely no take backsies bring him the night song, there was now no chance of him becoming hostile short of us attacking him, meaning we could just bounce straight on down. Well, I said, well, okay, it does involve down, and use Volo's Eye of Seeing Invisibility to check the signposts and find the correct button to teleport us to the archives.
Vaults.
Sorry, narrator, yes, vaults, good catch. I was down here for the Ketheric Codex to try and decode the necromancy of Thay. I don't really know why I was bothering with that, but I'm very glad that I did, because in the first room we spawned in was the Red Knight's final stratagem. This book would literally save Baldur's Gate. Since that turned out to be effectively the only useful thing actually in Sorcerer's Sundries for the purposes of the run, I'm going to pretty much ignore the rest of my escapades in the vaults. Instead, catching back up at camp, where a human-shaped cum stain has invited itself to my camp against my will.
Why does this keep happening?
They were obnoxiously insistent that I taste their meat, but I know better, and also know that no means no. Turns out, who could have possibly guessed? It's orange! Strangely, I was given the option to concernedly ask what she'd done with Yenna, a character that I had never met before this point and certainly not learned the name of. But moving on from Orin, I chose to finally read through the necromancy of Thay. And immediately failed the check. Great. No, this is fine actually. Thus, thanks to inadvertently cursing myself with the Ketheric Codex, forgetting that I didn't actually have any means to remove curse and give myself the temporary hit points, our grand total of defenses now numbered at 1 can-do attitude, 1 leaf, and 3 HP, down from previously 6. Killer moves, Ed. Killer moves. But who needs health when you have strength? And if we wanted more strength, we would need to visit the House of Grief.
To the House of Grief.
Yes, that's what I said, thank you. This house is home to simultaneously my favorite designed mechanic and least favorite designed check in the entire game. You see, for the uninitiated, there is a secret switch to access the lair of the Sharans down here in the heart mapping room. However, unlike in early Act 1, where the perception and investigation checks to find switches would simply highlight a hidden switch or lever that was already in the environment and accessible if the player could see it, Act 3 takes a different approach. Literally, that the switch does not God's damned exist until you succeed the check. A check that you get 1 chance at per character. And should you fail this check, there is only one other option. Guess who you need to bring here? Oh, what do you know? It's the DM's favorite character, Shallowheart. Again. Now, before you weigh in, you may find on one of the BG wikis that this switch also reveals itself if all of the Sharans in the House of Grief are dead. I read this too. Unfortunately, I also tried it on a previous playthrough. To my abject flabbergastment, I did manage to succeed the investigation roll on the 1 chance Al would get, meaning that I could still go through with the plan without needing to bring I finangled my way around a corner, spectacularly failed the perception check to see through easily visible open wood, and instead used the busted powers of flight not being flight but a jump with wings to make my way into the hidden den. Read this note, bypassing the otherwise really nasty religion check to know what the Mirror of Loss will do. If you hadn't figured out why we're here, that would be why. The Mirror of Loss. A final +2 in our strength, bringing us to a nice round 20, almost guaranteeing we will be able to lift both Orin and Gortash. Because let's face it, we're going to need to. Before we get there though, we do have a new growing problem. How on earth to get the damn door open? The most obvious way would be lockpicking. Unfortunately, it's behind a 30 DC check. The alternative way of opening it is undeniably weirder. You may notice something akin to a bowl or scale on this statue here. If the correct amount of value, gold or otherwise, is placed upon this plate, the vault door will unlock without needing to pass a check. Thus, in a move defying all common sense, but somehow completely in keeping for this playthrough, we turned everyone that we could invisible, straight dropped a huge wad of gold on the floor, and making our way over to the vault door. Meanwhile, the cheeky Quasit would then sneak up on it and use as much as they could to move it a tiny couple of dots further forward. Followed finally by the invisible mage hand picking up the entire wad and precision yeeting it straight onto the statue, thus opening the door for Al. Once inside, I found a couple of people just hanging out, and Al can't have no witnesses, so I made sure to remove the problem and stow them neatly in the box, before making my way over to the Mirror of Loss. I played around with the memory offers just on the off chance I might get the extra point in charisma. This is of course the one time I actually do get it, leaving us free to use our forbidden knowledge, guaranteeing a +2 in that sweet, sweet strength. One quick nap to shed some of our curses later, and it's time for a family reunion. Into the sewers, displace a beast, sneak through the sewers, set this corpse on fire, which causes it to bleed somehow, opening this door, invisibility potion, ignore this encounter, find some stairs, ignore the stairs, find this temple, and our darling butler just waiting outside. For yes, after all this time, this Right here is why we were playing the Dark Urge from the very beginning. The Dark Disney Fast Pass straight to the Temple of Baal. Believe me from some painful experience, if one is not the Dark Urge and finds their way to this temple first, trying to back-solve how to get here is pretty brutal. With the door mercifully open, it's boss fight time. Enhanced jump, feather fall, dash stack, potion of invisibility, turn-based mode, and scampering our way over to Orin as fast as mortally possible. Thanks to our freshly acquired 20 in strength, Orin is indeed liftable. And with some finagling, we do our brotherly duties of giving our dear sister one final lift. I had initially meant to drop her off near this cliff and then push her. However, going by the combat log, I think her body might have just spawned in the chasm without me needing to do anything. The cutscene immediately triggering, and Orin was, to even my own surprise, dead. Next up, Big Daddy Baal paid a visit through the form of some knives, and I accepted my heritage so that we could get the Slayer form, which, far as I could guess, was going to be our ticket through the Netherbrain. With Orin dead, the Cult of Baal was suddenly friendly to me, and I was able to walk straight home without hindrance. There was this weird moment where halfway up the bridge, the Orin's Netherstone cutscene decided to re-trigger out of nowhere, but I'm very glad it did, as I was standing still long enough to notice these Harpers lying rather inexpertly in wait for me. How they hadn't managed to spot the anorexic, blood-drenched, naked man exiting the Temple of Baal was utterly beyond me, but I wasn't about to look a gift beholder in the mouth and jumped straight out of dodge. Back up in Baldur's Gate, we paid a quick visit to the Roof of Wormrest and invisicrept over to Lord Gortash, performing the ancient technique of our bloodline and walking off with the ruler of Baldur's Gate. After dropping him off outside, a cutscene triggered that was inside, because this pretzel narrative makes less sense than a fucking TARDIS at this point, and I managed to browbeat Gortash into being considered his equal rather than starting a combat. Unfortunately for Gortash, whilst he would not be in combat with me, he would soon find himself in combat with the ground. And with a simple fly down the cliffside, all 3 Netherstones, acquired and stored where the sun don't shine. Well, better take one last souvenir. Back down at the Baal Temple, hang a left and go to the Morphic Pool. Cautiously, with weapons non-existent, we rowed our boat merrily down the stream until we got aggressively fingered by the ceiling. Demonstrating an immaculate understanding of front crawl, Al got himself back ashore with his hair still fabulously dry. A short stroll through the Morphic Pools, stopping only at this part, which is the one scripted combat of the area. Before rising from the deep came our final, true challenge. The Netherbrain itself and everything that would come after. We failed every single possible check in this sequence. Thankfully, because the Emperor won't dare let us have any agency, he turned up at the very last minute to drag us back to the Astral Plane, offering us the ability to become Illithid too. This part right here is absolutely crucial to how we're going to win. I take the Emperor up on his offer and devour Prince Orpheus. We are now officially a Mind Flayer. And with that comes some advantages, greater so than the half Illithid powers we had previously. However, the only one that matters for us is Perilous Stakes. A move that at its basic level grants a target vulnerability to all damage. However, they do also heal when they attack. Once upon a time, this was a favored technique to have someone grant vulnerability to an enemy and then everyone go to town on them. However, in Honor Mode land, you are only able to cast this and its advanced variant on yourself and allies. Unfortunately for Larian, I'm not interested in casting it on the enemy. I want this for myself. And specifically, I want the Illithid advanced version, known as Fierce Perilous Stakes, which I'll explain as I invisibility creep my way to the final encounter. On the surface, it may well resemble its lesser cousin. You grant an ally or yourself the ability to heal 2 to 16 hit points when they attack, but they become vulnerable to all damage for the duration of the effect, that duration being 3 turns. However, Fierce Perilous Stakes has 2 very specific traits that make it wildly useful for our purposes today. Firstly, no clue why this is the case, it can stack, meaning that you can have multiple instances of Fierce Perilous Stakes granting you multiple instances of health. But why would you want this? Well, because there's one little part of the explanation I haven't yet mentioned. In addition to the healing, the Fierce version grants 15 psychic damage every attack the creature makes. And need I remind you, this ability stacks. provided we can get to the encounter with the will of the Netherbrain, we will make like every great speedrunner before us and stack fierce perilous stakes on ourselves before throwing a magic missile directly into that thing's face, where every single dart of said missile will be hitting for however many stacks of perilous we have times 15 per dart. The damage you can rack up with this ability is batshit insane, and I love it. Let's see, where are we at right now? Oh, here we go. The spine of the Netherbrain, right about to do the last encounter.
Oh no!
And right about here is where I realized a problem you wise people of the future may have already foreseen. I kind of mentioned magic missile, and I kind of don't have magic missile. But don't worry, I just need to get close enough and then I'll change into Slayer form and we can use that, right? It's not like Slayer form has a chance to hit and could possibly miss. And actually, oh dear, now I think about it, I'm going to need to actually get to the Netherbrain, aren't I? Which means I'm going to have to survive an entire turn of channeling the power of Karsus, and I don't have Globe of Invulnerability against Mind Flayer Arcane Artillery, who cast Magic Missile that literally can't miss. Oh dearie me. The facts were these. For all of my planning, luck, and harebrained schemes, I stood in front of that spine of the Netherbrain with no idea. With the benefit of post-recording and some future knowledge, there was actually always an easy solution. I could simply have repeated the same cutscening glitch as we did with the Gith ambush, but because of the difference and distance involved, I didn't think at the time that that would work, nor that it would even be possible, and with only one shot at things, I would have been too scared to try. Most people looking to cheese the twin encounters of the Netherbrain, if you don't want to stack invisibility beforehand, will default to using the Globe of Invulnerability spell to make sure that the dragon and respawning arcanists either side of you can't break concentration on the spell of Karsus. Spell scrolls are a strange beast and only a few are guaranteed, such as the ones in Balin's pack back in Act 1. Once inside the Netherbrain encounter, if one is willing to cheese, many will go for an upcast magic missile, or some wildcards like to even throw fireworks. And even that's for if you don't feel like dipping into good old party-based Barrelmancy. So, choosing to handle the problem like you would eat a Loxodon, one bite at a time, I figured the best thing I could focus on was how to at least get to the Netherbrain encounter. And as I browsed through my pack looking for some key, some warhorn, some arcane object that would save my squiddy bacon, is when an unexpected friend came to save the day. Of all people, in my hour of need, came former Lord Enver Gortash, whom, if you kill him, will have 2 special grenades on his person that imbue the condition of Reflectogard, reflecting all projectiles back at their source. Under the circumstances, this was probably the closest I was going to get to actual defense. It won't help with AoE like the Dragon's Fire, but at least it's a shot. So I clenched my teeth and squeezed my butthole one last time, threw down the Reflector Guard so it would be nice and prepped before the combat even starts, and it was time to start Phase 1. The Karsus control point is quite a surprising distance from where you spawn in. Thankfully, keeping with the theme that old friendship is indeed magic, the last of Sovereign Spore's Haste Spore grenades was there to save the day. I threw it at the ground to provide myself and the Emperor 1 extra action this turn, and importantly to double my movement speed. It's worth mentioning here that Mind Flayers, or at least BG3 Mind Flayers, have a specific trait that means they can use their actions and bonus actions interchangeably. At the time of throwing the grenade, I had 1 action and 1 bonus action remaining. I was told that throwing the grenade would take my action. I threw it to the ground, gained a new action from the haste, and inexplicably lost my bonus action. Why are you like this? But there was no time to grieve my stolen resources. Straight to the crown of Karsus, and began what I genuinely believed would be Al's last act in Faerun. I would have to survive until the beginning of my next turn, with the dragon on the loose, and a lot of Mind Flayers, very willing to cast any spell in their repertoire to stop me in my tracks. And in a move that I wasn't even aware these ones could do, the first Mind Flayer Arcanist used Mind Blast on Al. This missed, but only because he succeeded a save. And here is where I learned the true glory of Gortash. If you didn't catch what happened just there, the Chain Lightning cast by the Metamage Persecutor went straight back in his face. I knew deep down that Chain Lightning does talk about sending a bolt at the enemy, but I never thought in a million years that would count as a projectile you could reflect. One Mind Flayer chose to burn his entire turn, sinking it straight into the face of the Emperor. The third in line did his best Yu-Gi-Oh! Pharaoh and Mind Blasted. From literally too far away for me to even be in the radius. I didn't need to make a check or anything. The fourth one, inspired by this, chose to Mind Blast at a 90-degree angle that wasn't even close to me, and I don't know what's happening anymore. Before the final horror, that the conical AoE fire breath of an adult red dragon is, to Larian land, actually just a reflavored fireball, meaning it's a projectile and bounced straight back in its face. Of all people, Gortash, the Dark Horse MVP. Now, onto the second problem. How the hell do I actually kill the Netherbrain when I can barely deal any damage? And also when by now, all my stacks of Fierce Perilous Stakes have expired. I can of course refresh them, but that's gonna take a couple turns to stack them as high as I'm gonna need. The Unbreakable Will of the Netherbrain rocks a tasty 450 HP. Meaning if I could stack Perilous Stakes 3 times, I'd need to hit it 10 times, and that's of course not counting for its honor mode mechanic, effectively meaning even if I could stack Fierce Perilous Stakes high enough to start dealing some damage, the majority of it would always be Psychic, and I couldn't then use Psychic the subsequent turn. I sat and pondered this for what felt like forever. There was no point browsing through my spell list. I slowly made my way around the arena, managing to stack as I went a total of 4 Fierce Perilous Stakes. 60 extra psychic damage on every attack I could make. By now, Slayer form was out the door. It had a chance to miss, and even if every single one of that 4 attack flurry hit, it still would only do 240 damage. It wouldn't be enough. So in desperation, I did the only thing that has made sense this whole playthrough. I rummaged through my bags, and I found a valuable lesson that I thought I'd forgotten about. For you see, as history has shown us, when all seems lost in a fantasy setting, you can look to the east. At first light, literally, the sun was rising during this combat, on the final day of the final battle, and without fail you will find a wizard willing to lend you a hand. Introducing the Curriculum of Strategy, the Artistry of War, guaranteedly found inside the Red Knight's final stratagem in the vault of none other than Sorceress fucking Sundry's. Do you want the quick and dirty on what this thing is? It's basically a 6-shot magic missile. 6 darts, each dealing 2d6 plus 6 force damage. From the jump of 450 health, we are looking at 48 damage coming guaranteed from the Artistry of War, but we haven't yet accounted for the Fierce Perilous Stakes, adding a further 360 on top. 408 points of guaranteed damage, leaving only the answer, I kid you not, to life, the universe, and everything, 42 hit points hanging in the balance to save the Sword Coast. With a total of 12d6 being rolled, I would have to hope that enough of those rolls landed high enough to make lethal. A smarter man would have put the rune powder bomb down and guided one of those missiles straight into it with a single dart out of the 6. I didn't think to do that. I'd made my peace, and from here it was do or die. I readied the scroll, drank in that sweet 100% chance to hit, closed my eyes, and fired.
No! Resist! Mind. Impossible! Pain! Fear! Terror!
Let me ask you a question. Do I make you horny, Rover?
After everything he'd been through, and the last couple of cutscenes, Gith Yankovic took his rightful place at the head of the Absolute, satisfying his darkest urge, and finally scratching my own urge for challenge. It had been a long road since day 2 of Honor Mode's release, but finally we could say,
in Baal's name.
With the drama moment over though, I do have to say one thing very quickly. I'm aware throughout a lot of this video, I've sounded pretty down on Larian for their game design and character writing. I'm just going to cut through the bits for a moment and inject a small dose of reality. I may have a serious case of resting bitch voice, but I am not the kind of person who sits down and commits multiple hours, nay, multiple tens of hours, over the course of many, many playthroughs to a game I don't deep down like. Baldur's Gate 3 is without question a fantastic game. I may personally have disagreements with most of gaming fandom and publication that no, in my opinion, it is not the new Messiah, but it doesn't have to be. Humanity is ever on a quest to divert everything into 2 clean columns. The haves, the have-nots, the hots, the uglies, the goods, the bads. In the sensationalized world of news cycles and social media, everything must either be the greatest thing since sliced potatoes, or cancer incarnate and it kicks babies. So I want to say, for clarity's sake, that through it all, through your weird interpretations of prone, your strange approaches to cantrips, your utter insistence that I bring Shadowheart along despite her being on first meeting an annoying character that no normal person would choose to willingly hang out with, your crimes against boxes and flight. The point is, I still deep down love you, Larian. And I really hope that now, in the wake of some shit you shouldn't have had to go through, you've hopefully now got Dungeons & Dragons out of your system. I loved Divinity Original Sin 2 fiercely. And I'm really looking forward to DOS 3. Because this beta I've played of it's fucking great!